the end of their life, they wrote a will where they said that they wanted to donate $6 million of their estate as well as this property that we're on to become a free library for people of Kansas City. And so Linda passed in 1938 and then Herbert passed in 1941. And after both of them were passed, their funds went into an endowment and the board of trustees was created and led by Herbert's business associate. And they looked around, they did a survey of Kansas City to see what was already being done. As you know, the Clendenny was already here, we're at KP Med, the public library was already well established at this time. And so taking all those things into consideration, STEM was where we found our niche. So that's a little bit of why we focus so strictly on the STEM area. We continue to this day to purchase new information in the large umbrella, which is the STEM field, but we also maintain a history of science. And so that means that we very rarely, if ever, purge anything out of our collection or deacquisition it. Upstairs are materials from about 1980 to today, and as we start to fill up on space, we'll do what is called a decade shift. We will take about 10 years of the oldest materials and send them down to our closed stacks. Below us are 2 floors of closed stacks, which hold materials from about the mid-1980s all the way back to 1840s, as well as printed patents, government documents, industrial standards, our whole collection of information on microfilm and microfiche. And then additionally to those 2 floors below us, we have an entirely southern wing of the library of closed stacks that are dedicated to our historical journal titles. Altogether, it's just about 1.5 million items of collection. And what they told me when I started was that if you line up all the bookshelves in one straight line, it's about 43 miles worth. I wear a pedometer now, I get my steps in, but all this to say is that we have a lot of really interesting and unique things to offer you. And as a part of your visit today, towards the end, we'll be going down towards our History of Science wing, where we'll have not only a rare book showcase, but I've pulled examples from our general collection to demonstrate the breadth of our collection. I understand you all are very seasoned researchers, people who are experts in your respective fields, so I'm assuming you guys have plenty of experience navigating materials that we have here, but I wanted to demonstrate perhaps that we might have information that you had not yet considered, and hopefully we could be a resource for your continued learning after your visit here today. So before I move on, are there any questions about just our history or our general collections? Not yet. We'll see. So the room that we're standing in right now is the main public space of the library. This is our main reading room. The public is welcome to utilize our space and our resources Monday through Friday, 10 to 5. All of this space right here is available to use, and as well we have many free public programs. As you can see, we're still set up in our public programming format. Our next big program is about data analytics in football, where we'll have current football players, former football players, data analysts, and a lot of other folks discussing the role of data analytics in sports and how we understand the game. We did this last summer as a packed house, so if any of that interests you, I highly recommend registering. And as well as public programs, we are
You wouldn't know the date for that, would you?
It will be June 20th. Okay. Yep, and it's going to be in the evening, and there will be a live stream option. So if you can't make it in or don't want to be shoulder to shoulder with people, I would definitely recommend the live stream.
Okay, thanks.
And we do also record as many of our presentations as we can. And I believe this one will be recorded and put on our YouTube channel afterwards. So we try to make all of those information experiences as free and accessible as possible. In addition to our programming, we host exhibitions. Our current one is Chained to the Sky, which I will give you guys a guided tour of before we head down to your book showing. This will be up till July 13th, and then later on in July, we'll transition that to a showcase of our new acquisitions, primarily items that we've acquired for our rare book collection, but it also includes our general collections as well, and it's going to be very exciting. I don't know if no, I can. You guys are going to get a little sneak preview of something that will be in that exhibition, so I won't spoil the surprise. So let's go ahead and get started, just for the sake of time, let's go ahead and get started on your exhibition tour. We'll start. This current exhibition that we're hosting is about ornithology, and so it is divided into two sections. This part of the exhibition is about what we can do today to help preserve and participate in ornithology. We have 3 cases here, and the main one you'll see in the middle showcases several study skins. All of our study skins that we have on display were on loan from the Field Museum in Chicago. This is a really exciting partnership for us, and our first delve into having study skins on display here. So that's really exciting. This display right here is primarily species that are found here in our arboretum. The 14 acres that surround the library are considered an urban arboretum that hosts a variety of plants and shrubs and flowers from all over the world, and it includes 11 champion trees, which are the biggest of their kind in the metro. In this case over here, we have 3 items that we've pulled from our rare book vault that relate to gardening, and which is a tie-in to some of the information on our wall panels about ways that we can make or maintain bird environments. There are some really interesting pieces on display. This one in particular is in the back has a monthly to-do list for the home gardener, and it was written in 1664. So field guides in use in ornithology, you can see it almost developing over time as it hits its stride. But the important element of field guides is that the method of study before the inventions of field guides was to shoot the specimens out of the sky and stuff them. And the argument is that we can learn so much more by maintaining the bird populations as is, and that is demonstrated here with text and images kind of developing over time. What I think is really fun in a curatorial sense is that the beginning of this timeline starts with 2 works by women in this field, which I always just find personally exciting. But you can see Mabel Wright here in 1896. She's utilizing a lot of Audubon illustrations, but she's still advocating for her point. So she, not necessarily being the illustrator, but the advocate and the researcher and the citizen scientist. The spiritual connection between bird and man, as both populations grew alongside each other, and that is kind of demonstrated in this corner, and then you'll kind of watch it along the information panels and in the glass cases develop as we as humans decide to take a more humanist, a more scientific approach to gathering information about the birds in our areas. It's, as you can see in these materials, also pulled from our rare book collections. Starts to look a little bit closer to how we see science today, where there are these illustrations and information alongside of them, as we're kind of developing not just our understanding of ornithology, but also the technology of books. And you'll also see, if anyone is has a background in art or art history. These scientific illustrations will also develop over time, kind of from these stagnant 2D illustrations to like a full vibrant expression of movement and attitude of birds as we move around the corner into where we highlight two big names, Charles Darwin and John James Audubon, and their contributions to ornithology. And as you'll move through the timeline, you'll learn a little bit more about the relationship between humans and birds and how that interest, that excitement about not just birds, but our understanding of the globe as commerce and trade and travel continues to develop. It becomes a sign of wealth, it becomes a sign of status, it becomes a sign of intellect to collect these curiosities and have them on display. It becomes an element of fashion. We have an unfortunate egret that became a hat over here in this corner. Populations. In this farthest glass case, we have some birds on display that are no longer with us. Three different species that are currently extinct: the Carolina parakeet, the ivory-billed woodpecker, and the passenger pigeon. But as you can see over in this case, the vibrancy, the detail that is being brought to these illustrations that kind of invoke that excitement. And it's no wonder why people were excited to own and display these specimens or to have their feathers on apparel or other items in their home. Got a lot of practice. For 10. In conjunction with all of the studying that Charles Darwin participated in on his journey on the Beagle, his work with finches, it was primarily very helpful in the study of ornithology. Believe it's, yes, right here is open to his Origin of Species, to the chapter about natural selection, and as it relates to the evolution of beaks for food. It's that kind of information that kind of sparks a continued understanding of birds in their element to advocate for their maintenance and their safety, as opposed to this size of book was incredibly expensive to make, and it was purchased by very wealthy individuals, presidents, celebrities. I know that there's one in the New York Public Library's archive. We do have the smaller, the regular sized version of this in our collection, but there's really something to be said about seeing these birds in life size. And like I mentioned earlier about the artistic representation of these birds over time, a lot of their attitude. While the entire diorama may not be entirely 100% scientifically accurate, like point out, this panel is also from Audubon's Birds of North America. Rattlesnakes don't climb trees to hunt in this way, but it does create a very dramatic and exciting tableau, and it gets people's attention, and it does create a lot of interest and launches several Audubon societies, including here in Kansas City. Both individuals have huge legacies, and so that's why we kind of highlight them here to go into a little bit more detail about their work. Not a problem.
It's a real treasure that you have here.
It really is. Yes, this is really exciting. This exhibition was put together by our newest library president, Dr. Eric Dorfman, who joined us last summer, so almost a year ago. And his background is in ornithology, so this was a labor of love on his behalf, and so it's really exciting. It's also been really exciting to see the turnout from the general public as well. I didn't know how many bird enthusiasts we had nearby, but everyone's really turned out for it, and that's been really exciting for us. However, I was told that we're possibly working on a collaboration with the Nelson Atkins Museum where our books might travel to their location.
Oh.
Several exciting projects coming down. This alcove right here is just a bit about our history. Right behind me are our founders, Herbert and Linda, and as well as Linda and her two Bourgeois puppies. So if anyone is a dog enthusiast here, I would take a moment to check those out. And then right behind you folks right here is an image of the original house, the Hall family home that functioned as Linda Hall Library in the library's inception in 1946. They opened their doors of the house as the library, and it functioned as such for about 20 years. The main reading room that we were in opened its doors in 1955, and between the 50s and 60s for another 10 years or so, the library functioned out of both buildings until the home was finally demolished to make room for this expansion. While we are sad that the original home is no longer here because it is gorgeous, we did salvage some pieces from the home, and we use it here in this wing, and it's not only just visually a lovely piece, but it's also a nice our origin. So I'll point those out before we go into our rare book showing. Dedicated to individuals needing to use items from our rare book collection. The illuminated room towards the back of this space is actually our rare book vault, which holds about 10,000 items of either the most fiscally valuable, the most environmentally delicate, the scarcest, or things that pose a high theft risk. All of those that need that kind of environmental security are housed here in the vault, and we have another additional 50,000 items in a less environmentally restrictive area that we refer to as just the cage. All of those materials, while in a separate area of the library, are still available to you to utilize. We just ask that you submit a request about 48 hours in advance so that we can staff this area and so that we can work with you to make sure that we have the items that you need and make any other recommendations or provide any other security measures like book supports or any other materials that you might need to handle the material safely. And then we just ask to know a little bit about what you are looking for. So if you are continuing to do research, or if you are working on even a creative endeavor. We've had writers, we've had artists, we've had, we had a high school individual. He was about, I would say, 15, 16 years old, who was just an enthusiast. He learned about Euclid in his math class, and him and his math teacher came here to learn more about Euclid's thank you. You just saw the lights go out. Yes, so yeah, he was learning more about Euclid and geometry, and that was just a really rewarding experience. So I always like to make sure that I emphasize that this is a resource that is meant to be used. It is just the only caveat is that we just need a little heads up to prepare the space for you. So speaking of books, we're going to go into the auditorium in just a moment to learn about items in our collection, and you will also have the opportunity to handle these materials. While on TV, you might see folks use the fresh white gloves to handle materials. Currently, the standard is just clean, dry hands. So I wanted to take a break and direct you all towards the restrooms down this hallway, just to a fresh wash of your hands with warm water and soap, and then just refrain from.
We overheard Sarah giving the introduction on getting your hands washed, no white gloves needed. Well, you're welcome to sit anywhere. We ask that you not handle materials right away. We're going to go over a few.
Find these resources, and then I will briefly explain what is available along the back wall that I curated for this experience. Then I will hand it over to my colleagues to share what they've pulled. But before I move on, I would like for them to introduce themselves before I forget.
Sure. My name is Finch Collins. I'm the Assistant Curator of Rare Books. So amongst many of my job duties, I manage access to the History of Science collection, which the items on the tables in front of you are from. And I have the great pleasure of that my colleague will be leading the session today.
Hi everyone, I'm Rebeca Escamilla. I'm the Rare Book Curatorial Fellow. So from my day-to-day duties, I'm mainly migrating the exhibits from the 1990s, early 2000s to our current, more modern platform, as well as doing source verification, so making sure that the sources are correct. And I also help along with what my supervisor.
That's sort of a theme of Linda Hall people. Is
Yes.
Everyone kind of does everything.
So for anyone unfamiliar, our website is lindahall.org. This is our homepage that you'll see when that pulls up. And I just briefly want to point out some areas of interest on the website that I think you all here under collections, you'll see a button for curated and digital collections. Here you'll find collections from our catalog of our previous exhibitions or other themes that we have curated, but primarily this top left button leads you to all of our materials that our library has fully digitized. And this number continues to grow every day, so I encourage you to always check back here, but these are high resolution scans done by our digital initiatives unit. All of our new acquisitions for our rare book collection are in line to be scanned. Information that is highly requested gets scanned, all in the name of increasing access and preserving what we currently have physically. As you know, the more the item is handled, the more delicate it becomes. Let me see if I can pull up an example.
Oh, this is a good one. We didn't think we'd ever be able to find this book, and one just came up on the market. So
This is from 1857, sketches with a microscope, and as you can see, the high level of detail. Anything that is, let's see, before copyright, if there is no copyright restrictions on the material, here we go. You are free to download and explore on your personal device. Anything that is still under copyright, we just ask that you create an account with us to log in, and it allows you to check out a material, and that's how we kind of play nice with copyright law. As you know, copyright law is something you don't want to mess with. But just to give you an example of the quality of materials that we have available for you that you don't even have to be present in the building to access.
Question?
Yes.
Is there when you're into this sort of thing, is there a standard resolution, which, like for the business or for the lab, what would that be? What would be the resolution then?
So generally,
when you say high resolution, I'm just
yeah,
curious.
so the PDFs that are served on the website are not the maximum resolution that we capture because the PDFs are already so large that machines can struggle to open them. So they are compressed a little bit, but generally the digitization initiatives unit captures at 300 DPI, sometimes up to 600 DPI, if we have specific plans for using those images in a really large scale context, but I believe 300 DPI is the standard. And if you're ever interested in getting a higher resolution image than what is available on the PDF, they almost certainly have the master files still, or would be able to reshoot an image if you're looking to use it for a project.
Thank you.
But it's a constantly evolving. I mean, in 2000, the future of digitization was CD-ROMs, so standards change.
Of course.
Yeah.
Thank you.
In conjunction with digitizing our books, this unit, our digitization unit, also works with researchers from around the world to provide access to the information that we have that we are allowed to scan and send. So I'm sure that you all have worked with colleagues from a variety of backgrounds and possibly are all over the place. And if you are excited, and then after your experience with the rare books, you'll be all given time to freely browse all of these materials. Starting here on the left, I provided an example of an item from our folio collection. These materials are often oversized. I would say about 50-50 of the collection is pretty fragile for their age, and the other half are pretty new. Depending on the time period, a lot of prints and illustrations were printed separately from the text, and sometimes they came in these larger scale plates. And so this one is from, this is from 1929 in Hokkaido, Japan. Next, after folios, is an example of our industrial standards collection. We have one of the largest historical collections of industrial standards in the nation, with over 800 industries represented. Just a collection of some of our most frequently used industrial standards. But if you know anyone in the trades where they ask you, is this up to code? Do you know what the code is for that? They're talking about the standards for that area. So I've pulled a couple of those, namely the National Electrical Safety Code, the boiler and pressure vessel codes, and then a collection of standards from the ASTM. I've also pulled a small selection of our government documents. I tried to pull some that you might not have thought about when you hear me say government documents. I believe we have quite a few branches of the government in our collection, including the Food and Drug Administration, the Department of Agriculture. We have NASA documents, but I have a few interesting smaller pieces on display here. After that, I have a collection of our historical serials. We try to have volume 1 to the latest that is available in print, and everything in between if we can. And so I've tried to pull a selection of interesting topics that you might not think are available under a STEM library. What I like to say is that we have something for everyone, so if you have an interest or a specific topic that you're studying, give us a shot, type in your keywords and just see what pops up, because you'll be very surprised.
Question.
Yes.
Going to digital, how extensive is Linda Hall's commitment to continue periodicals into?
As long as they are printed in the physical format and tying into our collection development plan of collecting items about science, engineering, mathematics, and technology. We will continue to collect it as much as we can. There are issues with publications going digital, well, with publications folding, with our own physical space being a resource that is dwindling. These are all things that we've taken into consideration to our strategic plan. We plan 3 years at a time, but we have those in power that have the bigger picture and are making those bigger decisions for our collection.
We don't currently provide access to any electronic only journals because the way that model is set up with serial publishers is that you have to, it's a Netflix model, you have to rent access to the serials, which the cost adds up and they can then delete it at any point. With a print though, they can't exactly come and demand their copy back. And it's often people say, well, but how can I get the latest things? And well, maybe you can't with us, but sometimes a couple weeks ago, I can't remember the name of the journal, but a journal suddenly, the publisher folded and all the back issues of the journal that were online were suddenly not accessible. And the digitization unit got about 500 requests that day alone because suddenly all the libraries that only had digital access, no one could access it anymore. And so we were the only place that had physical copies of it. Anyway.
And just lastly,
Sorry, continue.
our closed stack books and our open stack books to demonstrate our historical holdings. I again pulled some very interesting, unique titles related to STEM, but might not be what you think of at first. And then our open stacks just to demonstrate the areas that we're continuing to invest in, and also the I guess the types of writing that we collect. I didn't necessarily pull anything that was too specific or highbrow, but we definitely have a lot of popular science books in our OpenStax collection. We are interested in encouraging lifelong learning and the development of citizen science. So you might see a couple of fun titles here alongside more academic information, but that is just a brief overview of what I pulled and why. But now I'm going to turn it over to my colleagues, and they are going to do the same with everything in front of you.
So before we start delving into the books, I'm just going to give a brief overview of the History of Science collection here at Linda Hall Library. So the History of Science collection has an estimated 50,000 volumes, and that includes books that specifically talk about the history of science, innovations that have been made, particularly those of Western perspectives. We do have a couple of Asian or Latin American books in our collection, but they're more of a minority. The areas that we currently collect are science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. We don't collect medicine because we have or UMKC has a collection in medicine, so it's just in order to not compete with a local library. The books that we see here in front of us have been included into the collection through different means. So some of the more popular ones are through donations. So people that are have inherited their parents' or grandparents' books, look through them. They send us a list to our library and we decide whether or not we accept the books. Another way of how books come into our collection is through purchase. So that means that we look through booksellers' catalogs and we decide if a book would add more, would be valuable to our collection. So that is another way of how we purchase books or how we ingress them. That would be about two of our most popular ways.
Yes.
How we get the books. So kind of like the question of what makes a book rare or why we would be interested in a book for our collection. one would be age and value to our collection. So a lot of the books that you see here are older. Some of them are even incutables. So that would be around the early history of printmaking. So when the printing press was starting, we collect those books specifically for science. Another way of how we define a book a rare book would be the condition of the book. Some of the books are also delicate. If they're at risk of deteriorating in a way, we move that into our collection if they were previously in the main stacks. And for some of the books, it's inevitable that they will slowly deteriorate. So we try our best to bring them into the history of science collection and treat them and be as careful as possible. But with this in mind, they might still deteriorate. There's not much we can do about that. Another way of how we define a valuable book for our collection would be, even if it's newer, we have some newer books from the 20th century that are in our collection, and we edit that in our collection due to association, because a lot of the times authors, when they come and give guest lectures, they sign a book, so we would keep that in our collection just so that it doesn't get lost or stolen.
Yeah, lost.
Yes. Another way of how books end up in our collection is that even if, for example, an article is in a series, but if there's a page or two that are particularly invaluable, that particular book or that series would be moved into our collection. So an example that we constantly bring up is the discovery of the structure of DNA, since that is like 2 pages in a book of a series, so we would bring that into our collection. Is that missing? That's it. Okay. So as for the handling of the books, they're currently on book cradles, so that would be the pillows and the foam structures here. We ask that they not be lifted from the book cradle, that they remain in the support structure due to the delicacy of the delicate nature of the spine and the covers. Since, as you may see, for example, for this one, when it's opened, the spine cracks. So we would like to keep the spine as intact as possible. And when you turn the pages, we ask that to please be as gentle as possible. If a page or if a book can't be opened completely as how we have it set up, then we ask that it please not be forced open. And then another thing is that we also have bookworms here. So if there's a particular page that you want to look at or read, you can just lay it gently on the pages, and that will keep it open to prevent further tearing of pages. Is that it?
Yeah, one that I always forget to say, please don't lick your fingers to turn the pages.
Yes, that's like second nature.
I know, yeah, because some people don't even think about it, and I see them go, and I'm like, oh no.
So we will just be going through and giving a brief overview of the books in front of you, and then after that, it'll be just, you can roam around, stand up, look at different books. So we're going to start with this table over here, and you can get up to take a closer look.
Or you can stay seated.
Or you can
Your
sit.
call.
It'll be easier for these ones in front. So here we have the elements of astronomy and geography explained on 40 cards, and these cards were published in 1795. And then also on the other hand, related to that one would be the astronomical and geographical diagrams. So the reason why I pulled these two books artifacts out is because when we have visits, we usually don't get to show them off, and we just wanted to show them a little love. And also the idea is that one of the focuses that we have here at the library is trying to disseminate knowledge. And these, the cards and the diagrams are an example of how in 1795 and 1850s,
Those ones aren't dated. About 1850s.
okay, about 1850s, that they were used in a domestic learning setting. So for example, a parent would purchase these cards and it would be made as in sort of a game. So they would have to guess what the diagram at the front of the card was depicting. And this one is just simply the map of the moon, and it would be turned into a game, and whoever had more points would win. So it was just something meant to be informal, guardian parents with their child, which is interesting because people, one of the things that I hear is that they didn't think that back in the day, education was enforced or reinforced domestically. And here for the diagram cards, we have that these can be lifted up into these light, and you'll be able to see the light coming in through a thin layer of tissue. So I thought it was interesting.
Those are cool. Those are cool.
And also defines what we now think of what makes a rare book. So, oh, I don't think this
Nothing on
one.
that.
Yeah. Well, some of the other cards in there. And then also apparently these cards could be purchased individually, and one card would have a cost of around 1 shilling. So, didn't have to buy the whole collection of cards.
If you're handling these cards, you're welcome to, don't spread them out all over the table, but you're welcome to. There's a whole stack right here, and
Yes.
you can flip through and look at them.
Yeah,
It's
probably
not
just
just the two.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Here we have Dmitry Mendeleev, and this would be what we considered the first periodic table. Apparently there's some controversy around that because some argue that Dmitry wasn't the first one to make a periodic table as how we know it today, but his is one of the most influential ones. So I thought to bring it out, and it just be interesting that something that you might like to look at through. And here for the table that I have open to, it is the first 8 elements. So that would be oxygen, hydrogen, nitrogen, carbon, and 4 halogens. So in the first volume, he focused more extensively on 8 elements. And then for his second volume, he still had like 50 more elements to go through.
You've written books.
Yeah.
You know what it's like.
So it was through that moment when he was under pressure of having to publish his book that he started to notice the patterns and started to arrange them based on the similar characteristics. So for example, I believe one of them was atomic weight. I can't be completely sure on that one. Yes. And he was so confident in his table that he famously would even write to other scientists when they were discovering elements, and he would be like, can you actually go back and remeasure this element, the atomic weight? It doesn't match up with what I have predicted. So it's kind of interesting also to look at that, the communication between scientists. And
What language was
that would be Cyrillic?
It's written in Cyrillic and it's in
Cyrillic.
Russian. So if anyone reads Russian or the Cyrillic alphabet, neither of us do. So please come and tell us secrets about the book that we don't know.
And then for the other book here, that is René Descartes, and that one has a long title. It is Discourse on the Method of Rightly Conducting One's Reasoning and of Seeking Truth in the Sciences. So it's kind of long. It was published in 1637, and we have more René Descartes' book in our vault, and those are more specifically what we would consider mathematics. This one, from what I've seen, there's arguments apparently that it's more philosophy, and it also has an introduction on the optics, refraction. Yes, meteorites and geometry, and one of the reasons why I picked it out is because I was so excited. I found the phrase where he uses his famous phrase, "I think, therefore I am," which probably doesn't mean a lot, but it's just exciting to see like famous phrases throughout history and like seeing it the first time when they were used on print.
Yeah.
And then
I thought it was in Latin that he wrote it.
It is. It's written in Latin there, but the translation is, I think, therefore I
do-
am. Yes.
Cogito ergo sum.
yes. And then René Descartes doesn't need much of an introduction. He's very popular in mathematics. I believe in his geometry.
Sorry.
Yes.
Yes. French is.
So it's in French.
This is the
Yes.
French edition. Yes.
Yes, and then he wrote it in French instead of Latin, which Latin was the language that we used for scientific treatise and philosophy. I'm not sure if he specifically stated it, but we can assume that it was just to have it be dispersed more to a general audience that spoke French rather than Latin. And I believe that in one of the bookmarks, and some of the books may have bookmarks, just in case if anyone wants to look through the book.
Those are often highlights particular
Yes.
things, so you're welcome to browse or to consult the bookmarks if there are some.
Yes, and then for his geometry section, I believe that he uses, or it's the beginning of what we know as the Cartesian. Yeah, the system, the X and Y grid. I don't know mathematics, but I assume that's important.
Yes.
Yes, and then I don't believe, just in case if I didn't say it, it was printed in 1639. So, here, I have this one.
Okay. And then I pulled a couple and I'll go with them after.
Okay. And then for this one, you can look through, glance. This one was by Ernest Haeckel. It is the Art Forms in Nature. It was published in 1899, and Ernest was a German zoologist and naturalist. So here in this book, he goes through and he has more than 100 plates, and on each plate he describes different organisms. So that would be including radiolarians. Yeah. And he apparently made them popular to microscopists, a person who does microscopy. So it's pretty cool.
It's a beautiful book.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and one of the influences is that it bridges the history between art and science, and apparently it was also influential in, was it 20th century? Yes, early 20th century architecture and art. And the plates are beautiful. So.
Do we have any idea, for instance, on that book, how many copies might have been made originally? Do we know?
This
I
one,
don't have
so
that
this
information.
this book is an interesting question because originally it was distributed in fascicles. So originally it was distributed 10 plates at a time, and you would subscribe. But then it was reissued after it had been distributed by subscription. It was reissued in this larger form with its own like publisher's cloth cover. I don't know the specifics of how many were printed off the top of my head, but given the time period, I'm going to estimate about 1,000, perhaps fewer, perhaps more, unless you have the exact amount.
No, it was printed between 1899 and 1904. But not sure specifically for the amount.
I don't know, but I bet we could figure out if someone has done the research on it.
Yes, and then when you come and look at this book, you may also notice that the
the edges.
The edges are also have a floral, or not floral, marbled.
It's marbled.
Marbled design.
It's a fancy
so
book.
the aesthetics of the books are also pretty interesting to take note of how the printers were making decisions for the design of the book. And then for
Which one would you like to go to?
I'll go back to those two over
Okay,
there.
great. So we tried to pull from a very wide range of the collection. Hopefully everyone here has something that they're interested in.
So this is an example. Earlier I had mentioned that our focus at History of Science is science, technology, and engineering, mathematics. But this book is not any of those. This book was donated to us, and it is De Bellis Civilus Romanis. So it is a history book by Appianus.
Yeah, Appianus.
Appianus?
If anyone does Roman history that has more expertise than us, you may be
Okay.
able to tell us more.
Yes, please do correct.
So it's a history of Rome,
Yes, basically, in
which is
essence.
not science.
So this book was donated to us, and I believe that it is one of the two earliest books we have in the collection, and this book in particular was printed in 1472, and the other book was also printed in 1472. We don't know the specifics of which month, which book can technically be crowned as the oldest. But the reason why I pulled it out is because since it is a history book, we usually don't get to show it some love and show it off a little to our visiting groups. And then just in case if there was a history professor here who might enjoy some Roman history. So for this one, Appianus was born in Alexandria. He was born around, estimate, the 2nd century of Rome. I don't think he was automatically made a Roman citizen. I'm not sure for the specifics, but he does move to Rome, and then he begins to practice Roman law. He holds various offices in Alexandria, Egypt, and I don't recall which. I think he was he practiced Roman law in essence. And then also here on the book we have some illustrations. What would they have been called?
That's our armorial.
Armorial. So this book was printed, and the large armorials that we see here, so the P's and the strip of illustration.
Sorry, that's an armorial. These are illuminations.
Oh, illuminations. They would have been left in black. So the patron, or not the patron, but the owner who would have purchased the books, they then would have made the choice if they wanted to have a scribe to illustrate the armorials and the illuminations.
And so this was 1472. This would have been less than 20 years after the Gutenberg Bible, if that gives you a sense of how early this book is. So the Gutenberg Bible, first book printed in Europe. This is less than 20 years after that. We're
Yes.
very much in the infancy of printing in the West.
And then for this book, I believe it, I'm not sure which book it is, or which book we have. But I think since it is the Civilus Romanis, maybe it might have been on the Roman Civil Wars. I'm not sure. If anyone knows Latin, speak up. But apparently he also didn't have many sources, and the sources that he used.
What was the title?
De Bellis
De Bellos Civilibus Romanis. Yes, that's for the civil wars in Rome.
Oh, okay. He doesn't have much sources that we do know, and the sources that he does include in his book are used to promote his more conservative views within the Roman history. So apparently he wasn't a fan of popular movements. And then here we have another book. Yes.
So you may notice I'm opening this one not the traditional direction.
So this book is Euclid's Elements, and we have quite a couple of Euclid's Elements in our history of science collection.
So many Euclid.
Yes. But what makes this book in particular interesting is that it was printed in Arabic. So I don't know anything about Euclid or history of geometry.
You know a lot about the history of geometry. Don't sell yourself short.
But the reason why I brought it out is to kind of illustrate the movement of knowledge and the movement of books in the medieval period, and how knowledge was transferred. Because Euclid was a Greek mathematician, he compiled his elements from previous mathematical knowledge. And then I believe that after the fall of the Roman Empire, that knowledge was quote unquote lost, and it was preserved by Arabic scholars. And Arabic scholars would then bring the Euclid's Elements to medieval England. And it was then in Europe where it was translated back into Latin.
Do you know where it was made? Are there watermarks on the paper?
So this is actually a Medician family.
This was
printing.
printed in Rome, 1594.
And it was a total failure.
Printed word.
In Rome, 1594. And the reason why it was printed in Rome in Arabic was because I believe that this particular printing shop was printing
Let's do a watermark check.
Bibles, Bibles in Arabic languages. And I believe that this, correct me if I'm wrong, but maybe it might have been after.
Bible were in Hebrew or Aramean, and they were from that they were to Greek, from Greek into Latin.
Yes.
Yes.
So
It just would be really interesting to know where the paper comes from.
So if I'm not entirely sure, it's if it's in the catalog record, I can double check. I wasn't able to see any watermarks just on these first couple, but what you were saying about the languages that would have been printed in, the reason this was such an expensive book to make is the Medicians, the Medici family had to commission this entire new typeface and had to design this Arabic typeface, and this was an attempt to sell to a new market. So they were attempting to sell.
Is this a
Arabic
typeface,
readers.
not a block print?
This is type. This is metal type.
Oh.
So it was a
Movable or
movable type. Yes, movable metal type.
Yes, and then for the diagrams,
And it did not sell very well.
No, it didn't. For the
Do we know
diagram,
There just wasn't as much of a market as they'd anticipated, and books at this time, I mean, paper was the largest expense. As you can see, it's a lot of paper per book. There's a huge capital investment into an Arabic typeface, and it just was not successful.
yeah, and then the goal of the printing shop wasn't Euclid; it was more religious books.
audience.
But they had to print
Oh,
Euclid
there's a
to make some type of money.
It's a European watermark. It's a crown. It's I don't have Haywood right on me, but I'm sure we could find the cross reference.
And then for the diagrams, they were apparently secretive of how they were made. So some people believe that it's wood marks, and then wood marks would be a block of wood. It would be carved to the design that would be printed. But they believe that the printer might have used metallic rulers that were bent to make the shape. But we're not sure because the printing shops sometimes wouldn't divulge their
That's trade secrets.
yeah,
You don't want
trade secrets.
the bane of historians now and
Yes.
forever. May I give one handling note
Yeah.
on this? So handling note on this one, because it's unbound, please just take one at a time, and please don't put them out of order because we will never be able to get them back in order. But other than that, it's actually in remarkably good condition because it very clearly sat on a shelf like this for hundreds of years because the top is incredibly soiled, and then as soon as you open the first page, it's clean. So it's actually in remarkably good condition, all things considered.
What was the year of this one?
1594.
15?
1594.
1594.
It's on the back there.
It is on the
Did
back.
you see- On the binding.
It
right?
is, yes.
But where did you see your watermark? I'm sorry.
Oh, where did I see the watermark? Let's see. How about, Rebecca, do you want to do your last book? I'll find that watermark again for you.
Thank you, sorry.
Was this my last book?
Oh, was that your last book?
I think it
Oh,
was.
amazing. Well, I'm stuck.
Could we go back just to the,
Yeah, absolutely. So,
up the back?
would you like to see this one? So it doesn't
No,
look
I
like
wanted
every
to
page
see
is
the
watermarked.
kind of medallion things in the middle there.
Absolutely.
Yeah, those are amazing.
Aren't they amazing? Well, and this, the header on the top is my favorite. Isn't it beautiful? So cool.
And they left just the right amount of space.
Exactly. Well, we're giving preliminary introductions. Hopefully, once we're into the stage where we're moving around and looking at books, we'll all be floating around and are happy to answer your questions. So a few more books, and I'll end on a recent acquisition that I think will be of great interest. So 2 books over here to show some of the breadth of our collection. I'll start actually with a book that doesn't look at first glance like it should be in the History of Science collection. This is a copy of Richard Feynman's What Do You Care What Other People Think? This is from 1988. And you'll notice, though, that it has a large number of Post-it notes in the spine. This probably looks like some books in your office if you're a Post-it annotator. And the reason that we purchased this book was because this was owned by Edward Tufte. If anyone knows Tufte, he is still alive. He's does data visualization and questions of how to best represent quantitative information and communicate quantitative information. And he was born and raised in Kansas City, and so this was his copy of Richard Feynman's book, which he then copiously annotated and used as he cited this in many of his work about visual communication. I think my favorite one is this book. Feynman spends a lot of this book talking about his investigations into the Challenger shuttle disaster. He was one of the people with the O-rings who was able to figure that out. There's a photograph of him doing the O-ring demonstration in front of Congress, and Tufte has written in red pen, "Better with transparent glass." So he's critiquing what Feynman did and always thinking about how to visually show information. He's saying, Feynman, pretty good, but better if you'd use something transparent so we could all see. That's a fun one. Other forms that are not books and are less science. This is another recent acquisition that is what we alternately call a fine press book or an artist book. We bought this one for a variety of reasons. It's good to illustrate historic techniques of printing and print production, and it also is relevant to the history of science in the Midwest. This book is called, I'll put it down on the table after I've done this, it's called Corn, From Farm to Table in Woodcuts. It's printed in Iowa by a book artist in Iowa City, and I won't be able to unroll it all the way because the table is not long enough. It is a series of woodcuts visualizing the production of corn in the Midwest and all the stages that corn production goes through. And it is a very interesting book because one of the areas that we try and collect in is what you might call science and society or science and art. We aren't able to collect a ton of popular science works simply because we have only so much space in the history of science collection and only so much budget, but we try when we can to purchase books that illustrate how people are thinking about science beyond scientific papers or beyond sort of conventional bounds of scientific publishing. And this is a really, really cool one, and the entire scroll has been digitized online. We can unroll it the rest of the way when we're going around, but it's pretty fun.
What is the date on that one?
2023. So that's brand new. Well, because book artists love to do it, it's actually written in Roman numerals, but it's MMXXIII. 2023.
And Finch, isn't that one of very limited run?
Yes, so it's one of 6. So he only printed 6 of these. We were the first institution to buy it. I was updating the catalog record today, and I noticed that Florida State University bought one. So there's 4 copies left.
I'm sorry, and where was it printed?
Printed in Iowa City.
Oh, I see.
So, really, a really cool book, and we're actually going to be putting this on display soon. We're doing a show of new acquisitions after the Birds Chained to the Sky closes, and this is one of the ones that we've had several discussions about how to best put it into a display case. So, the last book I have, well, actually I'll give a quick little introduction. We try to always bring out at least one big, pretty book. We've seen lots of pretty books. This is a really big one. This is, I took Spanish in high school, so I always pronounce French like it's Spanish, so pardon my French. Jardin de la Malmaison, something. And this is the garden of Empress Josephine, and it is her, so it says,
The wife. Yeah.
yes, à Madame Bonaparte. So, to Madame Bonaparte. And it's a recording of all of the plants, many of the plants that were in her garden. She was a prolific plant collector and collected a large, circa about 1800, was collecting a lot of varieties that were newly brought to Europe. So she would aim to be the first person in Europe to have a particular specimen to
Plus, she
illustrate.
came herself from the Caribbean.
Yes,
So-
exactly. And it may be apocryphal, but in researching this book, I read that they say that if a Navy vessel, during many of the conflicts and the wars in France or in Europe, if a Navy vessel declared that they were carrying a specimen for Madame Bonaparte and were able to present it, they would let that ship through the blockade. So they're like, no, don't worry, we're not here to invade. We just have a new palm tree for the Empress.
A new invasive species.
A new invasive species. Well, they didn't think about it in those terms, but so this is a beautiful, beautiful book and lovely to look through. The last book I've pulled out for you is a new acquisition that is very important. Actually, I had asked my boss if I would be able to bring this out for you, and he said yes. So you all get to see it, which is really exciting. Where do I even start with this one? So, this is, I think, the most important acquisition Linda Hall has made in easily the last decade, if not longer. And it's of a book that, at first glance, we already had a copy of, but there's more to the story. This book is Galilei's Siderius Nuncius. This is from 1610, and this is the book that in approximately 60 pages, Galileo, he addresses the Medicean family, and this is, in many ways, I call this a grant application. He was looking for patronage and sponsorship.
Who's the printer?
The printer is Thomas Baglioni.
Rome, Florence?
Printed in Venice.
Venice.
Printed in Venice. And this was the book where he discovered the moons of Jupiter, theorized that the stars, he looked at the stars with a telescope and said, actually there are more stars than we can see with the naked eye, and perhaps the stars are infinite. The fact that Jupiter has moons indicates to me that perhaps the Earth is not the center of the solar system, and a few other. Oh, and also the moon is not a flat disk, but is round and spherical like the Earth. And you should pay me. And they did. They did. This was the book that earned him sponsorship, and we already had one copy. But the reason we bought this copy is because it has. Should have found the page for this earlier. It has, right there, you see that handwriting? That is Galileo's handwriting. So this copy of the book has 5 places where Galileo himself has corrected the text. Our other copy had 3. There's a lot that we still don't know about this copy, but we've had scholars here before we bought this to make sure that we were buying an authentic book. They all said it was good. And the reason that we bought this and we're so interested in it is because it's bound with 2 other books from 1611. It's bound with it's bound with 2 works by Kepler that were verifying Galileo's findings. there are a lot of unanswered questions about who owned this book, because the binding is a binding expert, Nicholas Pickwoad, who's in England, looked at the binding and said this was bound really soon after the printing. So someone got these 3 copies and then bound them together pretty quickly. Siderius was printed in Venice. The other 2 books were printed in Frankfurt. And the question was, who would have access to Siderius and these other 2 texts, and who would have bound them together? And so we think it was a prominent German astronomer, a prominent German scientist from the time period. We're still not exactly sure who. We're trying to find the other trail end, but we purchased this book in part because we think that it has a lot more to teach scholars, and has a lot more that we still don't know about who might have owned this, how it got to where it got, why Galileo specifically annotated this copy. And I brought it out here for you because I wanted you all to have a chance to look at it and to see some of the work we do. I'm happy to answer more questions on it. I have a lot more information in my head about the book, but I don't want to just talk your ear off. And I definitely recommend looking through it. It has the famous engravings of the phases of the moon and the shadow moving across the moon. So I definitely recommend taking a look at that. And with that, we release you to browse the books as you see fit. Rebecca, do you have anything else to add?
I don't think so.
All right. Well, we will both roam and answer any questions you have. And if we don't know the answer, work on finding the answer for you.
What's your earliest Copernicus?
Earliest Copernicus, we have a first edition and a second edition. So we have the 1543 and the 1561? Whenever the second edition was. We have both of those.
And did you follow up as they got printed further and further north?
Not, we may. I know that we have the first and second editions. I'm not sure how many other editions we have, but
Basically,
we
we're
certainly
printing it
may.
in Basel fairly early. too,
Yeah.
So it was making its way.
It was making its way. Well, please do look at Siderius. I mean, because Siderius itself was printed. So the first edition was in Venice in 1610. Of those editions, Galileo printed on 2 different kinds of paper. One of which is called ordinary paper, which this is ordinary paper. Our other copy is fine paper. The fine paper copies, all of them are corrected, and all of them, as far as we know,
And how
distributed.
visible are the watermarks?
Pretty visible, actually. Let me get my. It's in quarto, which makes the watermarks a little difficult to find sometimes. Let's see if I can. No, stop it. Let's see if I can find any.
Who'd ever thought that the most, it could be the most important
Here's
use of
one.
a cell phone is
Exactly.
to
No.
see
Oh my,
what fine
see, there's a
watermark.
little bit of one right there, and I know that
Let's see.
my boss did an extensive watermark analysis on it.
Handwriting, where is the handwriting?
So there are several places. Here's one. He's correcting. The printer wrote diameters, and he corrected to say semi-diameter, so radius.
You know, if someday you go to Padua in Italy, the University of Padua, you are going to see there still the classroom where Galileo Galilei used to teach, and you still have there all his instruments. You have everything there, the desk.
I need
everything.
to go.
Yes,
Padua
Padua.
and
It's about 1 hour from Venice,
Okay.
west of Venice.
west of Venice.
Okay.
That sounds
You ask
lovely.
the person who is there, the concierge, and he's going to take you to the
classroom.
classroom where Galileo Galilei used to teach. And
It's really
they
high
still
quality
have
paper.
all
Isn't it?
his chair,
You don't get any.
his desk,
Exactly. So
all
of it there.
Yeah,
So
all
this
his-
is his asterism page. Our other edition, actually, someone had trimmed, and it had lost this star. So we gained 1 more star in this new copy. But the question we still have. Oh, also, it has this cancel slip. He produced this whole book in about 4 months because he wanted to be the first to publish his observations, and he wrote to Cosimo de' Medici, who he was trying to get as his patron, and he said, "Dear illustrious Cosimo, I'm going to name the stars the Cosmin stars, And Cosimo writes back and says, "Oh, no, I'm a humble man. Please name them after my family and not after me in particular." But Galileo had already sent the pages to the printer, so he pasted over and said, the Medicean stars, not the Cosman stars.
Can you see what's under the pasting?
You can't. Well, so actually, this one is there was a misspelling of Medicean, so they pasted over. I bet we could with a little flashlight. But so most of the. So yeah, you can see
Yes,
it.
you can.
You can see the COS Cosima. So yeah, he sent them to the printer a little bit too soon. He should have waited for his reply back to make sure that he named them correctly.
But then replies were not as instantaneous as now.
Not as instantaneous, but well, the question we have about this copy. Let's see if I can find a good page to illustrate it. Is so most of the copies of Siderius Nuncius, a good portion crossed the Alps for the Frankfurt Book Fair in 1610, and they sold out immediately. And so then there was a second printing of it in Frankfurt in 1610. It's called the Frankfurt edition. We have one of those as well. So it's odd then that the person who had owned this book previously would have a copy of the Venice edition and not the Frankfurt edition, because the other two pamphlets, or the other two books within it,
Are Frankfurt.
You mentioned the quality of the paper. Kepler did not splurge on paper the way Galileo did, and so you can see his paper is not nearly as high quality. Kepler and Tycho Brahe both loved their cheap paper, which has caused problems for us now. So it has the second one, and then it has Kepler's Dioptrice. And the question really is, who would Galileo have sent? The fine paper copies went to his patronage network. Who, though, would have received a copy from Galileo with the corrections of this, like the true first edition?